Hello guys, it's Dranzer V2 doing another part of Reimagining Beyblade Burst. This is of course part 11, and it will be focusing on the Bakuten Shoot remake bays. As per usual, this is just me sort of conceptualizing and thinking of how I would have done the Bakuten Shoot remakes if I was in charge of it. So, yeah. This is a bit of a more difficult one because remakes are a little bit more restrictive. I try not to make... Well, with remakes, I feel like they try not to make new parts too often aside from the layers. So I decided to kind of challenge myself and try to do that as well. Try to just pick the best parts of what I can, that already exist, with an asterisk, because, see, I've already done 10 parts of the series, and I've made up a lot of my own parts, so I will be using them, although it's more towards the end with some of the, I guess, new line of sorts that we'll get to. I mainly saved it for those, but yeah. So I am allowing myself to use some of the parts I've already made up in this series, but yeah. As far as how this goes, so I was thinking about how many lines I should do here. I opted to leave out the 4-layer bays, which I feel like the bays that come before the anime always get ignored anyway, so I thought it's fine to just leave those out. And then also HMS, I was debating, but I don't think it makes much sense either. I just don't see them doing HMS remakes even if they got to that point. So instead, I'll just be kind of doing the first season as we got. V-Force, again, as we got. Maybe a couple new bays in each of these lines, but, not many. But I will also be making a sort of G-Revolution remake line. That's kind of what's going to take a lot of time here, but yeah. With all that said, let's just go ahead and get into the bays. So first up here, we have kind of the Season 1 Bakuten Shoot remakes. These are mostly meant to be somewhat similar and in line with a lot of the earlier bays from, Burst, with one exception that we will get to, but I think that's a special case. But for the most part, I do want to make the parts here relatively similar to the, when they were released, so some of those later ones were released during, like, GT, and some of the earlier ones were, like, dual-layer era, so I am trying to be mindful of that for this first series in particular. After that, we might go a little bit crazier, but for now, I think this makes the most sense. So for our first bay, we have Draciel S, Central Weight. The fact that they didn't do this to me is baffling. Why was press used here? Weight already existed. It's a metal ball. I mean, I know the color scheme here looks stupid. And yeah, that's the thing. I know the color schemes aren't going to match. It is what it is. But, like why was this not our bay? Why did they not use weight on Draciel? They had it. It was like the obvious choice. It made perfect sense. Press did not make sense. This just feels like an oversight, so I wanted to fix that. I don't know why they didn't do this from the start. It just felt very obvious to me. Our next bay is Driger F, Zero Iron. I never found Extend to be that good of a choice here, and Iron might not be perfect, but I just feel as if it would make more sense to be used on Driger F, personally, so is what it is. But yeah, Iron I just think is a bit of a better choice. Again, obviously these aren't going to be perfect, but it was an improvement in my mind. Next up is actually the last bay of the Season 1 bays. Yeah, I left most of them the same, but this is actually a brand new bay that I'd be making a remake of, and that is Wolborg 2, 8 Cross, Endless. And I know that's bearing, but we'll talk about it. So Wolborg 2, I think, deserved a remake. I'm just using Wolborg as an example, but, anyway. Wolborg 2 should have had a remake, I think, and then 8. Wolborg used 8. I added a frame, obviously, to be in line with the color of Wolborg, but yeah, Cross, I think, should have been the one used. And then, Endless. This was actually used on my DB evolution of Chaos, Archaic Chaos. Endless is basically bearing, except the bottom part, instead of a POM, is just rubber. It's basically Wolborg 2 / Dry MS's, bottom part, blade base, running core, whatever you want to call it, put into Burst driver form. So there you go. I feel like that just makes the most sense. I already made the driver for it a while ago, because I thought that should have been a part made, but it wasn't, and Also would set up perfectly for a Wolborg 2 remake, which I really think should have just been in the main line. Alright, now we have the Beyblade V-Force remakes. So as far as the regular V-Force remakes, I'm going to kind of leave them similar to what they were, kind of, again, that, like, GT sparking era. I think that makes most sense. However, once we get to the V2 bays, the last few, of course, then anything goes. I'm doing the DB stuff with them. Also worth noting, I don't want to mention this with every single bay, so I'm just going to get this out of the way now. All of the V2 bays will be like Driger V2. They will all have the special layer system with the SP parts that go on the layer. Yes, this is not perfect for every single V2 bay, but it beats out using something like a frame or part of a driver to represent the SP parts. It also gives an excuse to actually use DB discs, which again just makes more sense. I think the main point of these remakes should have been to adapt them into Burst, and while again, even though they're not perfect, the SP parts being their own part on the layer that also accommodates the system that they're part of, it just works and should have been done with every bay. Driger V2 should have been the rule, not the exception, so with that, that's kind of how I'm going to be handling the V-Force bays, and especially the V2 bays. First up, we have Dragoon V Sting Evolution Dash. It's the same exact combo, but the driver, why was this not a dash driver? Why not? That's all I have to say. It just should have been a dash driver. It wasn't a dash driver. Let's just fix that here. Next up, we have Dranzer V Hurricane Dimension Dash. This is the same exact scenario. It's not a dash driver, and it just should have been. Next up, we have Driger V Vanguard Weight. So yeah, this just... I don't like this disc choice very much, honestly. I feel like they all should have had GT discs for this era, not core discs and frames, so I feel like Vanguard actually felt pretty decent for a Driger V remake, so yeah, let's go ahead and do it. Now, obviously the color's very off here, but it is what it is, yeah. I feel like this would have just been a better Driger V remake overall. Next up, we have Gaia Dragoon V Convert Iron Dash. The layer's fine. Disc, yeah, again, core disc frame, no. Let's use Convert instead. It'd basically just be in the normal mode like this. I wouldn't really advertise, like, to swap it. It'd just be because I think the shape works for it. That's the main reason. And then Iron Dash should have been here. Why was this not here? Would have been a great time to get a Dash version of Iron. And yeah, there is what the bay would have been like, to some degree. I just, again, think that this would have been a much, much better choice, and finishes off kind of the basic V-Force line, and again gives everything, well, the dash drivers they should, but also proper GT discs. Alright, now we have Dragoon V2 Giga Exceed Dash. This is just what it should have been. Dragoon V2 obviously would have the SP parts on here, so Giga would work much better for it, although I would have kept the black paint of wheel. And then, yeah, it got Explosion Dash, but I feel like that was more to sort of give a level of representation to the SP parts. Exceed Dash would have just worked better overall in my eyes, and because you would have the SP parts modeled in properly, it would have now actually felt like it belonged, and that would have been nice. But yeah, I think this would have made much, much more sense for a Dragoon V2 remake, and again, I just wish they would have used DV discs with proper SP parts. That would have just been so, so nice. Next up, we have Dranzer V2 Spread Dash Reboot Dash. So yeah, the driver's fine here, but I do think, yeah, you take this, why is this here? A core disc and frame during DV, no. SP parts would make a good, addition to this layer, and then of course Spread Dash just feels like a very, very good point for, what? Disc, why did I say point? Anyway, a good disc for Dranzer V2. So, yeah, this would just make way more sense overall. Next up, Draciel V2 Fortress Stake Dash. So, again, Layer would be better. Fortress, I just think, would be a very good Draciel disc, so we're going to go with that. Stake Dash, I use the driver for Plume Quetzalcoatl, my DB Quetzalcoatl. Basically, it has kind of a press-like appearance, except this bottom part's a bigger free-spinning ball, and then you have kind of these spikes where they'd be larger, and also this whole upper part would be free spin. I just felt like for something like Draciel V2, it would have worked fairly well, so I just decided to go with it anyway. So, again, this would be different. This isn't the actual driver, but it works as a good representation since it's kind of an evolution of price, so yeah. Again, Draciel V2, the fact this is the final burst bay was such a disappointment. This would hopefully help to make it actually, you know, how it should have been. And the last bay of the V-Force line is actually a brand new one here. And that is Burning Kerberous over Spin. Okay, so Burning Kerberous layer would just be modeled after the actual thing, with of course the SP parts modeled in. Over would just work well as a DB disc for it. And then Spin. This was the driver I used for my DB version of Uranus, last Uranus. And basically it has 2 bearings inside, which is exactly what the blade base of Burning Kerberous had. But also there'd be an additional gimmick to this one. The layer would have metal in the center, kind of between the teeth, as Spin has metal right here, at least, again, the concept would. And so you'd have kind of a better lock, and again, I just want to replicate that here. I think it would make sense. Again, why not go the extra mile for kind of this remake? If you're using Spin, again, Spin would kind of be made to accommodate Burning Kerberous almost, although it would have just been cool in general. But yeah, if the gimmick is there with a magnet, why not just replicate it? Would have been a cool thing to have, so yeah, that's it for V-Force, so let's get into the new line. And now we have a G Revolution, so this is a difficult one to deal with. First up, I have to make all these from scratch, so that's fun. I mean, I have the originals to work off of, but still. Layers, obviously, you could just assume they're similar to the other ones. I don't have any of the bays, so anyway. As far as the sort of layer system goes, I will basically be kind of copying over the SP part system. Now the SP parts would kind of be modeled after the blade bases, so same system, might change it slightly just so they're not compatible, because I don't think they need to be. But yeah, it would basically just be there to keep it within the DP system. Engine gears, that's just hard to replicate, so I'm kind of leaving them out, but I will be also somewhat adding them in. So I don't want to make new drivers here particularly, but I feel like there's not enough current ones to deal with this. So I found a good middle ground, which is kind of funny. You'll see what I mean. So yeah, and then for the engine gear turbo bays, like the GT whatever, you know, GT stuff, yeah. Those will be using BU discs. That's kind of the main difference there, and those will have BU locks molded in as well. So again, that's cool. So yeah, it kind of evolves along with DB in a sense. So yeah, let's just go ahead and start getting into these bays. So first up here we have Dragoon G, Giga, first reboot metal. So first up, yeah, Dragoon G, it'd be, I mean, I'm just using V2 just to have something on screen, but yeah, obviously it'd be modeled after Dragoon G. And the blade base would kind of be replicated with those sort of SP part replacements. Anyway, Giga, we already saw this on Dragoon V2, so I decided to keep it. And then, what did I mean by first reboot metal dash? What is that? So I didn't want to make actual new drivers here, because again, I don't think remakes really warrant them. But no one said I couldn't alter them a little bit. I mean, we've seen that with dash drivers and stuff. I mean, I know Quick Dash exists for Storm Pegasus, which is a new driver, but still wanted to avoid that for the most part. So instead, we're going to take Reboot, and we're going to turn it into something different. So Reboot Dash, obviously that does exist, but what are the metal and first parts? Well, metal would be this center part here that sticks out, and then also this little like star-shaped thing. So it'd be metal and go down into kind of larger metal. Is it perfect? No. but it works. It's something. And what's the first part about? Well, basically, reboot activates late in battle. The mechanism inside will be modified to activate very early, closer to something like shot. That is my workaround for the G Evolution bays to some degree. Not all of them are like this, but some of them, actually a decent amount of them are, so there you go, that's Dragoon G and my workaround for everything here. Next up, Dranzer G, Nexus, Lock, Reboot, Metal Dash. Okay, so Dranzer G, it's what you'd expect it to be. Just small left of the layer with the extra parts. Nexus, I think it works well because the blade base parts, I feel like it just works to have a smaller disc. Anyway, what did I mean by lock, reboot, metal dash? So I already gone over kind of how the reboot metal dash part would go, same as that, but what is the lock compared to the first? So basically, it would start off, in the reboot mode, as you would expect, but it just stays like this until it clicks once, and then it goes into the modes, yeah. It's to kind of emulate the whole hit release thing, so that's kind of how I would do it. It just, once it unlocks once it, goes over those tabs, that's how it changes modes, so it's not automatic, unlike the others. So, a little bit of work here for this driver, but again, the mechanism is still there. I think you could probably get by with it, so it's something. Next up, we have Driger G, Load, First Reboot Metal Dash. Okay, so Driger G, layer, extra parts, it'd just be Driger G. Load. So basically for load, this was the DB disc I used as a replacement for Gatling Dragon. Think of it like a full metal version of Sting that's also a DB disc. And then, first reboot Metal Dash, which is just what I used on Dragoon G. I just brought it over here. It just worked the best in my eyes. So, let's just keep it. So, fairly simple. Not as much explaining with this one, I guess. Next up, Draciel G, Illegal Mass. So, again, what is this? So, okay. Draciel G, like the other layers, it's just based on Draciel G. Extra parts are based on the blade base. Cool. Illegal just seemed like a solid disc choice here. And then there's Mass. This was a driver that I gave to Eldritch Phantom, my DB version of Phantom. Basically just has a very large, stationary metal ball, and the entire driver is actually just metal, aside from like the lock plastic, like the plastic on the lock, but the base of the driver, everything about it, it's metal. It's kind of meant to just emulate a spin gear to some degree here, and yeah, just a lot of metal on the driver and a large metal ball. That seems to be about what you'd want for a Draciel G remake, I would say. Next up, Gaia Dragoon G, Karma, Reboot Metal Dash. So this one, layers just Gaia Dragoon G, extra parts are there. Karma disc, this just felt fine enough, I would say. And then Reboot Metal Dash. So the bottom part and the extra part that sticks out are metal, but there are no alterations to the mechanism. So it's very similar to this, just again with the metal here, and I guess it's a dash version that already exists anyway. But yeah, just felt like a solid choice here. We don't need the mechanism swap. This one will do just fine. Now, for the GT kind of stuff, we have Dragoon GT, Beneath, Exceed Dash plus Z. So for Dragoon GT, layer space off of that, also has the detachable parts still. However, now BU locks are a thing, and you'd have 4 sets of BU locks here. And then the disc is Beneath. Beneath I used for Pulse Kukulkan, my BU version of, or I guess DB version of Kukulkan. And basically what Beneath is the plastic is kind of positioned at a lower point, think of under the frame Kukulkan had, just kind of that lower point, similar shape. I think it would just work here. Exceed Dash plus Z, it just felt like, moving parts with rubber. I just like how that worked, so I decided, what, let's go with it. So yeah, Dragoon GT, fairly straightforward, but I just think it is a pretty effective remake for it. Next up, Dranzer GT, Moon Axis Dash. Okay, Dranzer GT, same layer setup as usual. Also, 3 sets of BU locks. And then we'd have Moon. I just thought this disc would work decently well for Dranzer GT. And then there's Axis. I use this for my DV version of Amaterios, Aurora Amaterios, and basically, you take off the very tip of the driver and flip it around. There's a rubber mode and plastic mode. Again, kind of like when I talked about convert earlier, one mode doesn't matter. You want the plastic mode, and basically, it's sort of like Assault on the bottom, with the rubber outer piece of Anchor, which also would be free spinning. This felt like the closest I was going to get to this thing. I know it's not perfect, but again, as these Bakuten Shoot bays get more complex, it is quite hard to replicate them without just making very dynamic new parts, which again I was trying to avoid, but yeah, this is the closest I was getting overall, at least I think. Next up, we'd have Gigars, not Spire Dash. Okay. So Gigars, layers just based off of the original Gigars with the extra pieces, well, extra piece I should say. Then there's the BU locks. It'd have two of them, so two sets of BU locks, and then yeah, there's the knot disc. This is from Imperator Fornius, my DV version of Fornius. Basically, it's a kind of large, round metal disc. Well, the metal is actually on the outside, the plastic's on the inside, so kind of the inverted version of a typical BU lock disc. So, would be very cool though. And I think it works pretty well with Gigars. And then there is, of course, Spire Dash. So Spire Dash is sort of similar to Tower. It is from Secure Regulus, my DB version of Regulus. So this middle part here, like this part that moves around, this would be metal. It's like a metal semi-flat, effectively. And also, it's inverted tower. So basically, it starts off tall and gets shorter over time. It was the closest I was going to get to some kind of dynamic metal semi-flat, so I thought it worked fine with Gigars, and I already had the driver made from a couple parts ago, so why not use it here when it feels like it actually makes sense? And finally, we would have Zeus Sun Perpetual. Okay. Zeus, the layer itself, would be based on Zeus. However, the extra part would be different, because this would actually be based on the sort of sub-ring, or sub-attack ring. The attack ring itself is very small, and I'd have the actual layer kind of reflect that. So the extra piece would have to be quite large, and also the inner part would have to attach on normally, but the outer part, I believe, is, I'm pretty sure the sub-attack ring is free spinning. I'm not as well versed in Bakuten Shoot, but I'm pretty sure it is. So in that case, yeah, most of that part, aside from the part that attaches onto the layer, would be free spin. Then there is Sun. Sun is... Oh yeah, also I almost forgot to mention, Zeus would have one set of BU locks. That's it. Then there's Sun. Sun is basically Moon, except larger. Like, the plastic is just larger. Because I actually made this for Paramount Garuda, my DB version of Garuda. So yeah, I'd assume that the kind of sub-attack ring replacement would be decently large. This would just be kind of to pair with that. So yeah. And lastly, Perpetual. I made this driver for my DB version of Yggdrasil, Forged Yggdrasil. Perpetual, it's basically a slightly larger version of Yielding, except it's also free spinning, similar to Gyro. So a slightly larger Yielding that, again, kind of has that gyro functionality to it. So there you go. That's the last bay. That's Zeus. I think it makes sense. Sub-attack ring would be kind of cool to see, and everything else I think should make enough sense for this bay, probably. So there you go. That's everything. That's everything for part 11. I am not well versed in Bakuten Shoot at all, so this was a bit of a challenge to make because I really had to look into a lot of stuff. But hopefully it ended up alright. I know GR Evolution was also very odd because, again, a lot of those functions are just not things that Burst really has, and I did not want to be making new parts for everything, so did what I could. I used some of the new parts that I made in previous parts of the series, which I think came in very handy. There's no shot I'd have been able to make this part, well, the GR Evolution line without that. There's no way, so. Otherwise, I would have had to stick to just Seasons 1 and 2, which I did not want to do. So I allowed those in, which also helps for a couple other things before that, but yeah. Anyway, I believe that's everything for this part. So next up, part 12 will be the Metal Fight remakes. So that'll be interesting, so yeah. But yeah, for now, there you go. Those are all the Bakuten Shoot remakes. There's a ton of them. I mean, I added on, like, well, I had to, do a few things for Bakuten Shoot and V-Force and, like, some alterations, especially for V-Force, but then each of those lines I had to add an extra one in, and then, yeah, G-Revolution had to make the whole thing, which, was not fun. I thought the reboot thing was funny, how I altered them to make them actually work properly. That was fun. I did not want to give them all, like, stupid drivers that didn't make sense, or just use reboot, like, 4 times, so I'm like, yeah, let's have a little bit of fun with this one. There's still one more reboot variant to come in the next part. We will get to that when we get to that, but for now, that's all, so yeah. Thanks for watching, and bye-bye.